Today I'm here to talk about the shooting that happened last night there at the Dollar General store at 2400 block of West Pawnee. It's at the corner of Pawnee and about Meridian. At about 9:56 last night, a call originated from the place of business in regards to a robbery. We had three suspects that went inside of the business around about 9:56. Two of the suspects proceeded to the rear of the business, while the third suspect confronted the store manager there close to the front part of the business there by the counter. During that confrontation, the suspect kept asking the owner to open up the safe so they can gain access to money that is kept there in the evening. At about 9:59 is when three police officers arrived at the place of the business. Two of the officers was approaching from an east to west direction. Another officer was approaching from a west to east direction in regards to the business. As the officer that was approaching from the west to east direction got close to the front doors, he could see inside, and he saw an unknown suspect that had on a bandana inside of the business. As the other officers got close to the door, he motioned to them that we had one suspect possibly inside. As the officers were attempting to gain entry into the business, they noticed that one of the doors was locked, which was the east door. However, the west door was unlocked. As the officer opens the door, goes inside, the suspect, who is the deceased suspect, his name is Dejuan, Dejuan, middle initial T, last name is Colbert, Colbert. He's 28, has a date of birth of 11/18/93. Once the officer went inside, the suspect turns at him. He has a knife in his right hand. He raises the knife above his head. The officer gives him repeated commands to get down on the ground, drop the knife, and this is verified through our interviews last night with the officers as well as the employees inside of the business. The suspect did not comply with any of the officers' commands, and the suspect then proceeded to, in a rapid pace, move towards the officer with the knife still in hand. Like I said, according to the witnesses, the knife was above his head. The officer still giving commands. As the suspect got close to the officer fired his duty weapon, and then subsequently the other two officers, upon hearing the shots fired, they also fired their duty weapons, fatally wounding Mr. Colbert. He was transported to Via Crispy St. Francis Hospital, where he succumbed to his injuries at about 10:30 last night. Ironically, when you look at this business, about a month ago, on September the 25th of this year, it was the victim of another robbery at that time, about the same time. We believe through indications of doing this preliminary investigations that these individuals may be connected with several other robberies within our community. The investigation is being conducted in cooperation with the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, as well as the District Attorney's Office and also the Wichita Police Department. Right now, the officers are placed on administrative leave, which is in compliance with our policy from that standpoint. None of the officers were injured. Fortunately, like I said, Mr. Colbert raised the knife above his head. He went after the officer. The officer gave commands. However, he did not comply with those commands. And so as one of our witnesses said, the officer had no other option but to use the necessary force to stop the threat that he was being faced with. Another lieutenant, when you look at the age of the officers, they range anywhere from about 3 years up to about 13 years as far as tenure, the tenure of the officers with the Wichita Police Department. Lieutenant Kenny Landwehr is going to talk to you about there's a vehicle that we're trying to locate in conjunction to this robbery. Even though we currently have two in custody, as well as the deceased victim, for a total of 3. We still have one more that is still outstanding at this time that we're trying to locate, and we definitely need the public's assistance in regards to that, Lieutenant Landwehr.
Information that's been gathered during this investigation has led us to believe that there's a 4th person involved. He's been described as Hispanic Afro-American male, and he was last seen driving a light blue 4-door sedan. It was supposedly behind the business, parked and left prior to officers being able to check that area. But that's all we have right now. We do have 2 people in custody that were also present in the business. That'll be the 17-year-old and a 30-year-old.
You said Hispanic and Afro-American?
Mm-hmm. Same. It was described to us as an Hispanic Afro-American male who was driving that car.
The 17 and 30-year-old would be the 2 that were in the back of the store, right?
That's correct.
What did they do in the course of the confrontation and shooting? Did they try to flee the building? Did they
No.
hide, or was it just...
They did not offer any resistance. They were both armed with knives. Neither one of them offered any resistance to the police officers as they entered the building after the shooting.
Did they have bandanas on their faces
Yes.
as well?
All 3 of the individuals that entered the residence or the business had masks over their face.
How did the call come into police, Lieutenant?
It is a 911 call that originated from the area.
Not from within the...
It was actually within the store, but it was a 911 call from them that alerted the police to show up.
So do you know how the employees were able to make that call when the robbers were there with them?
Yes, I do, but we're not going to go into that right now.
How close was the one to the officer at the time of the shooting? Because a lot of people think if he only had a knife and you had a gun, why did you have to shoot him? But they don't understand how quickly...
The close quarters that they were there, I would say he was at least within 1 to 2 feet of him when the officer fired his shots.
And at that point, he was lunging toward him, it sounds like, with a knife.
Or approaching him anyway?
He was approaching him at that time
With the knife raised?
with the knife.
Yeah.
No guns on any of the suspects, but they all were armed with knives, correct?
3 knives were recovered.
The officer,
No firearms.
The officer who fired, where was he in proximity to the door that they entered? How close was he to the door?
He was just inside the door,
And the other 2 officers were where?
just outside the door.
But when the first officer fired, they then also fired, is that correct? All 3 officers fired at some point?
All 3 officers fired rounds, yes.
Any idea how many rounds we're talking here?
It's early. We haven't really completed our measure, but there were multiple rounds fired by the officers.
And he was hit multiple times, correct?
It appears so, yes.
Has there been any other officer-involved shootings this year? Can't remember.
This is the first of the year, right?
This was the first officer-involved shooting that resulted in a fatality. I don't know about any of the others.
Chief, you said that the officers involved ranged in tenure from 3 to 13 years. Do you know how long the officer that had the suspect coming after him with the knife, how long he's been with the force?
He's been on about 3 years. You know, all three of the officers are veterans with the Wichita Police Department. They've got some tenure with this organization. There was a second employee inside of the store that was also confronted by one of the suspects that had a knife as well. And we're fortunate nothing happened to her. She wasn't injured, but she was confronted by one of the suspects as he had a knife pointed in her direction. So,
Was that one of the other 2 I take it then?
pardon me?
The suspect that confronted her with the knife, was that one of the 2 that went toward the back then?
It was one of the 2 that went towards the back.
Chief, the investigation not complete yet, but based on what you know to this point, are you comfortable with the way things went down?
Well, it'd be premature for me to respond to that because the investigation is ongoing. I mean, the Kansas Bureau of Investigation is the lead agency that's conducting this investigation, and we're providing resources as needed to assist. And at the end of the day, it's going to be the district attorney's office that's going to make the final decision in regards to the shooting itself. Our goal is just to provide some additional information that wasn't provided last night at the scene based on what we've been able to determine throughout the night. I can tell you that the homicide investigators and supervisors have been up there since about 10:30 last night, and I think they left this morning about 5:30 to go home and get some rest, and they're back. So we're still in the preliminary stages. They're, again, working with the KBI. We're working with the KBI.
You mentioned that investigators are looking to see if and how many other robberies this trio may have been involved with or report that. And that this store had been robbed about a month ago. Do you have reason to believe that these are the same folks who robbed that store last month?
Indications are that they may have been involved in the robbery that occurred back on the 25th of September.
Does that store have a video surveillance?
Yes, it does have video. However, you can't have access to it because it's part of our investigation.
Oh, I'm just curious to see if you'll have that to assist you as well. Particularly if you compare this robbery with last month's.
Is Colbert or either of the arrestees gang members?
There's no indication that I'm aware of, I mean, from what we've been able to determine thus far, that there's no gang associations.
Chief, ages on the other two people arrested?
The other two is the 17-year-old, and then you also have a 30-year-old that were arrested. They're inside the business. They were inside.
17.
17. There's no other questions of me or Lieutenant Lang?
How does it hurt you that 3 officers are now off the street?
Well, when you say hurt, I mean, we're always concerned about any time we have to remove officers from the street, but there again, their health and well-being is imperative for us as an organization. And we make adjustments. I mean, we have the resources that we make adjustments. We make the adjustments when we lose members to military activations. And so there again, we've been very, very blessed to have the level of resources we do that we can make the necessary adjustments and not miss a beat.